That is a flamenco form called Farruca, which I think is one of the most accessible flamenco forms. And in this video, I want to show you what Farruca is, how to count it, and how to play the basic rhythm in a couple of different keys. And at the end, we're going to see if we can learn a little piece of a Farruca from one of the greatest flamenco guitarists of all time. So in flamenco, there are these forms, which are basically these little subgenres of flamenco that are distinct from each other. And what sets them apart from each other is how we count it, what the rhythm is, and very often the chord. So you may have heard names like tango, soleá, alegrias, and many, many others. These are examples of flamenco forms. And Farruca is our best entryway into flamenco because it's super straightforward in a very common time signature, 4/4 time. And unlike a rumba, it's not even very syncopated. So to learn the basic rhythm of Farruca, we're only going to need our index finger, although by the end of this video, we'll be using the three most important techniques for nylon string guitar: arpeggio, rasgueo, and picado. But let's start out with just the basic chords in the key of A minor. All we need to do here is play E7 chord, then we're going to go to A minor, then we're going to go back to E7, and then A minor again, and then D minor, and then back to A minor, then E7, and then A minor again. And that is the whole idea in Farruca. That's the basic chord progression. Now these are chords from a 1-4-5 chord progression. So we would call this the 5 chord in the key of A minor. That makes it harmonic minor, at least for that moment. And then A minor is the 1 chord, D minor is the 4 chord. And what we're going to do is just have our thumb on the 6th string. Even though this is an E chord, and we could play that low E string, we can just have our thumb down here just for stability, and it'll make a little more sense later on why we're doing that. And we're just going to go down and up with our index finger. So we've got 4 beats per measure, and we're going to play up in between every beat. So we're playing 8 times per measure. We're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Every chord gets a measure. D minor, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now here we can just end it because it's almost always going to end right on the 1. So this is an 8 measure progression, we could say. Now let's add in some embellishments there if we can. So we're playing E7, 1 and 2, 3, 4, but we're going to put our ring finger on the 2nd fret of the 2nd string, that's C sharp, and then our pinky on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, so that we want to hear this little melody going like this. That's what we're looking for in that first measure, and then when you hear that, you can be pretty sure that we're playing a Farruca. So we're going like this. That's our first measure. Now, you don't have to do that, but that's very often what you hear in Farruca on the 5 chord, which is our first chord. Then on A minor, we're going to have a little bit of an embellishment on that one too. So we've got A minor, then smush your index finger down to get a high F note there. And we're going to do that like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And it's on the 3rd beat that we do that little embellishment. Then we go back to E7. And again. Then D minor. Also on the 3rd beat, we're going to have a little melody thing happen, and it's just your pinky's going to tuck underneath your ring finger on the 3rd beat, just like we did on the A minor chord. 1, 2, pinky on the 3rd beat, then A minor, 2, 3, 4. Now this time on the E7, let's play E7 and just drag your thumb all the way across, and we'll have a nice little concluding phrase before we go. That takes a little bit of work if you're new to hammer-ons and pull-offs, especially with these 2 fingers. We're going like this. These are triplets, pulling it off. And then we can strum the rest of the chord on the 3rd beat. So the whole thing would look like this. If you want to do what I did at the very beginning of this video, that would be this. Instead of this little ending, I went. So a little bit harder. We've got a little mix of 16th notes and triplets in there. And then I went to E7 like this, which is just a B7 chord up on the 7th fret. And then I played A minor as a bar, so I could get that high A note in there. So again. So that is the basic idea of Farruca in the key of A minor, which is probably the most common key that you'll hear it in. And once you have that down, you can add more techniques once you have it down. And again, if you're not sure about this stuff, you can always just go 1, 2, 3, and not do anything fancy with the chord. And just start to feel that. This form Farruca, to me, is very reminiscent of an Argentine tango. You've heard this song before? That has a little more attitude and drama to it, but Farruca is same chords and pretty much counted the same way. Now let's see if we can add in a 4-stroke rasgueo, and that technique is this, where we go pinky, ring, middle, index, all in a row like that. Rhythmically, it's going to be a triplet into a beat. So we're going to go like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Right here, just before the 3, we're going to smush that down if you can, which you don't have to, but and there's our 4-stroke, and then take it off in the same place. At the end, you can do whatever you want. So that's just one example of how you can use a rasgueo or some other technique to embellish or ornament the basic rhythm. Let's look at another key. The second most common key in Spanish guitar is the key of E minor instead of A minor. So the same chord progression in the key of E minor would be this: B7 and then to E minor. That's always going to happen twice, right? B7, then to E minor. Now what we call the 4 chord in this case would be A minor, and then we're back to E minor. One more B7, and then E minor again. But we can make things a little bit easier on that B7 chord. Definitely a common guitar chord played like this. We need to know that one. But in flamenco, we very often play it like this: no pinky, and then take your middle finger to the 2nd fret of the 6th string. And that allows us to play all the strings so it sounds more full. So we're going to do that in our Farruca here, even though our thumb's going to be on that 6th string for the moment. Okay, so my thumb's here, and we're going just like before. 1, 2, 3, 4, E minor. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, then A minor. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now we do those little embellishments in the earlier Farruca in the key of A minor. If we're in the key of E minor, the notes are going to have to be a little bit different. So we're going to go like this. Nothing on this one. We're not going to do that little melody, because there's really no notes available in the key that'll make any sense, so we don't do it. So we're just going to 1, 2, 3, but on the E minor we can go like this: 2 and 3. I'm playing a C note, the 1st fret of the 2nd string. 3, just like we did on the A minor one. Then I'm back to B7. Then for A minor, it's not going to be F natural because all the F's are sharp in this key, so your pinky will play F sharp on the 2nd fret of the 1st string. 1, 2, 3, 4, back to E minor, G7, and that's it. So those are 2 of the most common keys that you'll hear Farruca played in. And now let's use these same chords in the key of E minor and see if we can play a little snippet from a famous Farruca by one of the greatest flamenco guitarists of all time, Sabicas. We're going to be using picado, which is index and middle rest strokes on an E minor scale. We'll be doing arpeggios as well, and some different types of rasgueo, as well as what's called a golpe, where our ring finger hits the guitar like that. So let's watch this little excerpt of a Farruca by Sabicas and learn how to play it. Okay, so obviously there's a lot more going on there than what we started with today. We start with that B7 over F sharp is the name of that chord. Now this time, instead of going down, up, the whole measure, we're going to tap on the first beat, and then on the and, do an upstroke. We're going tap, and 2, and 3, and 4. And that's a good thing to practice on its own a bunch of times. Going tap, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. 1, 2, 3. Now do the same thing on E minor. It's kind of convenient, that tap. It gives us a moment to switch the chords. Right at that instant that we tap is when we would switch. Now I'm going tap, and 2, and there's a little embellishment note here, first fret of the second string. You're going to strike that. Now we can go either direction. If we want to get more of an aggressive sound, we might be going more downs than ups, but it's totally up to you. First we started out going down, up, down on the beats, up on the ands, but now it's really up to you. But I would play down on the beats more often than not, would probably be a good idea. So you're going to strike that, whether up or down, and then pull it off. So it goes 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. So there's a stroke we didn't have to make with our right hand because we did that over there, and that kept the momentum going. So again, B7, E minor. Now to do it again. Now this time on E minor, you can play a rest stroke with your thumb, up, down, and then make this an E7. That's a secondary dominant. That's leading our ear to A minor. And now we do our 4-stroke rasgueo. Then we go to A minor, down, up, down. We have our pinky on the second fret here. That's the 4-stroke rasgueo. And he didn't just leave it down like we did earlier when we went. He's wiggling that pinky around, going, taking it on and off. Just a little embellishment. And then we go back to E minor. We can hit the bass note first. Up, down, we have the 4-stroke, there's that C note. And then we have B7 this way. Now this time we're going to play B7 the normal way. But again, we're not using our pinky, and we don't have our middle finger here. We have it here so that we can get this little E minor scale descending phrase. But we're going to add an arpeggio to this. Now this is what you could call the forward arpeggio. Thumb, index, middle, ring. So I have them all placed at once. I'm going thumb, index, middle, ring. Take the middle finger away. Pinky down here. That's one reason why we don't play B7 with the pinky here as much, because we want to do things like stuff like that where we need the pinky. And here's a good example of that. So we're going pinky, there's that note finally, and then we get to an E minor chord, except we're not going to strum it, we're going to start a little falseta, this is called. We have a little melodic interlude here that still follows the basic rhythm. Now once we're here, hold an E minor chord, and now we're going to do that same arpeggio again on the 4 middle strings, going. Now we have a melody there. Now you can play free strokes on that, but he's definitely doing rest strokes, and that's what I'm doing. I'm going. And that takes us to our third technique, picado, where we do index and middle rest stroke. That just lets us get more volume, because those melody sections that are just single notes need to compete with the volume of us going nuts strumming, and picado really helps us achieve that. So we have our E minor chord, play that low E string, and then rest stroke right there. So I'm going thumb, index, middle, ring, index, middle, index, middle, talking about the right hand. And in order to keep the chord down and let it still ring, we got to use our pinky here. So that's a good little practice of its own. Doing a bunch of those. So we got. Now that is the next measure, and I did a free stroke with that one because the thumb is happening at the same time, and it's kind of hard to play a rest stroke with the thumb and another finger at the same time, so we don't need to do it. So this happens twice. Now we go to that B7 over F sharp chord we played earlier, and now we jump out to this chromatic phrase. I'm in the second position now. Index and middle rest strokes. I did a rest stroke there on that note, the high note, because it makes it stand out more. But you don't have to do rest strokes. And again, we do this arpeggio. Now make this an E7. And there's an A minor chord. We can strum that or just play it as a block like this. Now we want to play this fast E minor scale phrase. We're going. So if you know what the E minor scale looks like open, that really helps me. That's what I'm visualizing, is this scale pattern. You're seeing them kind of as dots. But we're starting a ascending phrase first. And right here, make sure that we go back to the first position when your ring finger plays the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. So we got. Climb back up. right there, we're going to go back into the compás. So we have an E minor chord, and you can do anything that you want to right there, rasgueo, strum it, or whatever. Now we're going back to the compás that we did, and you can do it the normal way, the easy way from the beginning of the video, any way that you want. But what I did in that video was this. I did a tap, up, down, tap, up, down, tap, up. That's a very cool syncopated rhythm, kind of like a rumba. So it's like a group of three, group of three, group of two. I tap, up, down, tap, up, down, tap, up. Then go to E minor. And try to get those little embellishments in there if you can. This time, switch to E7, I went like this in the video. He doesn't do that in the recording, but he does something similar to that. I'm muting that. Just an option, and then A minor. Same thing as before, and then we have our arpeggio, or you can do a block chord. And if you notice in the video, I did what is called an arrastre, this little technique where we go backwards with the ring finger. I'm going thumb, free stroke, index, free stroke, middle, free stroke, just like an arpeggio. But the moment that I play the ring finger, I drag it. So that's essentially a rest stroke, rest stroke, rest stroke, all the way down like that. Sounds a little more dramatic that way. So that was the first falseta from that recording, and this is the very, very ending and exactly what he does on his recording. So we're skipping all the super hard stuff and getting right to the end here. We have an A minor chord. So that is a reverse arpeggio. We're going thumb, ring, middle, index, and then your thumb goes to the next string. But these are just pull off, so I'm going ring finger on the right hand, pull off, and then middle, index. So one of those is a slur. So we're going to weight in the right hand. So that measure is 1 E and a 2 E and a 3, 4. Now leave your middle finger down here and play E minor this way, only so that we can do this, that hammer-on, more easily. Because if we did it like this, we'd have to use our weak pinky, and then we would have to jump a little extra far to get to this final ending, which is hard. So play it this way, and we have, take your ring finger away at some point here, before you're finished with the arpeggio, and by the time you get to that first open string, make sure that you're completely off the chord so that we can get right to the scale thing. Now this is hard to play fast, definitely, but it's also confusing because it's super similar to what we did at the beginning, but it's not the same. So we're going up like this, and right here, make sure you change position again. Different than the first one. The first time we went just straight down the scale on the bass strings. This time it's going, we got to jump back to that note. And then at the end we're using thumb rest strokes. Try to get a little closer to the bridge. That helps you play thumb rest strokes better, and they sound better. And now I'm in the second position again. Drag your middle finger down. We got B7 here, but just the strings in the middle. So we don't need any pinky. Keep this as a guide finger, your middle finger, and we have a C diminished 7th chord. Make sure that you don't play beyond the second string because we want to hear D sharp, definitely there, so that we can hear a high E on the E minor chord at the very end. So the very, very end is... So I hope this video helps you understand the basic Farruca rhythm and gets a couple of different phrases under your fingers. This is a great one to start with and one of my favorite flamenco forms. If you play classical guitar already or like Latin jazz, nylon string guitar, the basic rhythm of Farruca should be easy for you to play, and as you get more familiar with it, then we can start adding more and more embellishments as you get better. If you like this, check out my nylon string guitar course where I show you all the techniques that you need for this kind of music.